fans, wherever you may be, welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Senior Bowl. We've finally reached the point in the offseason where we're talking and previewing the Senior Bowl, which is this coming weekend. So we're taking a look at players invited to the Senior Bowl in past drafts. More than half, 3/4 of these players will end up being drafted into the NFL. So it's a great time to begin to evaluate players if you haven't paid attention during the college season. And this is the time in the off season as fans that you're taking a look at prospects and trying to figure out what the Seahawks might do, putting together your own mock drafts, all that kind of stuff. This is the time now we start to pay attention. So welcome in.
Yeah. So this is always a fun week because you've got some of the top players, either they call it the Senior Bowl. Either they've completed 4 years of eligibility in college, or they graduated in 2018 from high school in order to be eligible to be here. So there are a bunch of players that aren't eligible because they're, juniors declaring early, that kind of stuff. But still, you've got most of the draftable players, and then they send out invitations and bring in some of the best ones. And with the exception of quarterback, you get elite players here at the Senior Bowl. And it's always fun to watch them work out. The practices, the one-on-one drills, that kind of stuff. You can learn a lot more there than in the game on Saturday, but it's still a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's a lot of fun. It's hard to watch. So the coverage this year is on NFL Plus, which is a streaming platform. You can bring it up on your laptop, your computer, whatever, on your phone. But I will say the coverage is still hard to watch, only in that usually the angles are from far away. If you're watching the full scrimmage, if you're watching individual performances, that's great. A lot of times the commentary in the background is talking about something completely different. Once in a while, they'll highlight a player, but often you're scrambling to figure out exactly who made the play and trying to find the jersey name on the back. To kind of put it all together. However, with that said, it is a great opportunity to get a look at these players. A lot of them go through an interview process at the Senior Bowl with individual NFL teams. You'll find scouting departments from every NFL team at this event, and Jim Nagy does a great job putting it on. He does. And really, it's anticlimactic, if you will, to actually watch the game because a lot of the information is had during these practice sessions where basically the microscope is on these players for 4 days of practice. Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's kind of run through this. Go ahead.
I was going to say a lot of the team scouts and GMs and anyone that's here from the NFL actually leave on Friday afternoon. They don't even stay for the game. So that'll give you an idea of it's this week of practice that they care about, not what happens on Saturday.
So you had mentioned prospects being light at quarterback. That's definitely true this year. In years past, there's been a few quarterbacks that have come that have been invited. I think Will Levis was invited to this one. He's been injured most of the year, kind of fighting through injuries, and elected to skip this bowl. Probably wouldn't affect his draft status anyway and could only hurt it. So he kind of sidestepped this. We'll probably see him at the combine, no doubt. But
yeah, Kenny Pickett was here last year, and he's kind of the last noticeable guy that showed up to the Senior Bowl at quarterback. And he was a guy that people had questioned: is he a first round guy? He's a fourth round guy, and he performed well most days. Had one really bad day last year, but did pretty well, and it definitely pushed him from that I don't know range into the first round. And so sometimes quarterbacks will do that. But when you're already set, hey, I'm a first round quarterback, that's what you're being told. These are guys that they don't have anything to gain. So why would they come here and they've only got things to lose,
including injury?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the guys that are here. Just a couple for me. Jaron Hall out of BYU is probably a 4th round prospect in that range, at least as far as I've got him identified. Kind of a shorter prospect, but a nice arm, lively arm, able to run as well. And the sleeper for me would be Tyson Banjant out of Shepherd. Believe it or not, you like Jake Hanier out of Fresno State. I think he did today help himself a little bit in practices. He looked good. For me, he's a little squatty and on the heavy side. So I'm not exactly sure if he's going to be mobile enough in the NFL, but he's got a lively arm and was accurate today.
Yeah.
And I know that teams like him.
Yeah, teams like him. I mean, he's a guy that he's not skinny. If you're out looking at that, but that also means he's going to be, in theory, more durable. He's got a good arm. And he's accurate. So he does those things well, but you're right. He's not athletic. He's a different kind of player, but so he's the kind of guy that'll be there in the 4th, 5th round, but has enough like tools that if he is quick at processing what defenses are doing, he can have a great career. I mean, of all people, somebody retired today named Mr. Tom Brady, who is not a particularly toolsy player, and yet one of the best of all time because of how well he reads defenses and makes decisions and that kind of stuff. So I'm not trying to compare Josh Hader to that, but Brock Purdy is in that same idea, right? Guy who not athletic, but just really smart. And and so that's kind of the kind of comparison that Hainer is getting, a Brock Purdy type late round guy that has the potential to be an NFL player. So I think he's worth watching.
A couple of position groups that are heavy with talent at the Senior Bowl. The next two that I wanted to talk about, running back and wide receiver, you're going to be able to find a guy in this Senior Bowl that you like because, especially if you're a Seahawks fan, there's a number of running backs that run in a style that Pete Carroll likes, that the offense really likes to dictate terms running the ball. We've already got Ken Walker Jr. He's more of an elusive, a bouncing back, if you will. It'd be nice to get a complimentary back in the system that was a between the tackles force to be reckoned with, a guy that's just going to punish you a little bit. And there's a few of those guys in this draft. For me, a couple of them, I'll just name Kenny McIntosh, probably the most well-known back out of Georgia here at the Senior Bowl. Guy that's going to be able to run between the tackles and run with some juice. And the other guy I really like that ended up breaking his hand yesterday in practice is Roshan Johnson, the 2nd string running back from Texas. The 1st string running back is Bijan Robinson, the guy that may end up going top 10 in this draft at the running back position. So there's a lot of tread left on Johnson's tires, but he's a really sizable prospect. I don't have his height and weight right in front of me, but I think he's real close to like 5'11" and 225 pounds. I mean, the guy's just a punisher and likes to run that way too.
I'm very interested in seeing more of Chris Rodriguez Jr. out of Kentucky. He's 5'10", and 224 pounds. And what little I've seen of him at this point is a guy that just runs people over. Doesn't do much of running around people. He just runs people over. And that's the kind of guy that you need like on the goal line or 3rd and 1, right? You need someone who's going to run people over and get you those couple of yards, even if they're not a threat to take it deep. And the Seahawks could use a guy like that.
Daniel Jeremiah today commented that Chris Rodriguez Jr. out of Kentucky was the most consistent running back in the first 2 days of practice.
Interesting.
So yeah, maybe a riser there. Now I've seen projections where he ends up going in the 6th round or something. I think that has a much more desirable floor and ceiling in the NFL than he did at Kentucky. And I could see him definitely going in the 3rd or 4th round just because of the style that he runs with and so forth. And he catches the ball out of the backfield too. And then Tyjae Spears out of Tulane. Everybody's talking about this guy.
He's had a great couple days of practice.
He's a little smaller than Seattle would probably go for, unless they just want a complete change of pace back. But he's got speed for days, and he's just been kind of electric.
Yeah, but he's not really a change of pace back when your starter is Ken Walker, who's also got speed for days and is a guy that bounces. The change of pace for Seattle would be a guy that comes in and pounds between the tackles, knocks people back, and all that kind of stuff. So true. All right, you want to talk about wide receivers for a minute? Well, the wide receiver class here is it's interesting to me because there's some guys that really look like they're ready to separate themselves and be, those first round receivers. I think it's a pretty, I don't want to say it's a deep class. It is in that there's a lot of talent wide receiver in this year's draft class. I don't think there's the top end talent. Like last year, there was 7 wide receivers that went in round 1. This time, I think you're looking at 3. But at the same time, there's a lot of second, third round talent,
and they're here at the Senior Bowl.
Wide receiver. Yeah, they are.
Yeah, there isn't top end talent here, first round ish, but you're going to get like you said, second, third, and fourth round. There's probably 12, 13 guys in the wide receiver group here at the Senior Bowl that are going to get drafted. You're looking at Rashee Rice. Everyone's talking about Rashee Rice, 6'2", 203 pounds, runs great routes, precise route runner, etc., and has speed to break away. The sleeper out there everyone's talking about is Andre Iosivas. I guess he's just been very elusive, one of the most consistent performers so far in the Senior Bowl, according to Daniel Jeremiah, who's there covering for the NFL Network. And everyone seems to be talking about a guy I've never really paid attention to. And I'll just mention his name. Maybe you've seen him, but Michael Wilson out of Stanford apparently is the talk of the Senior Bowl as far as the wide receiver group, being, I think he's about 6'1", 205, and just running great routes and really beating some of the corners and safeties out there in the first 2 days of practice.
Yeah, I mean, kind of surprisingly beating guys out there in days of practice, because if you watched his tape Stanford was not a good team and hasn't been for a couple of years, and it's not like he went out there and stood out. It's like, well, they're a bad team, but they've at least got this one good player, and so it was kind of he's just out there and he looks like a guy that's going to go early in the draft. And you're like, well, where was this in college? Exactly. And part of it was he played on a really bad team. But
and Tanner McKee was his quarterback at Stanford. And, for whatever you say about Tanner and people expect him to go in the third round and stuff, that's fine. But his touchdown to interception ratio was almost 1-to-1. And he just really struggled getting the ball out to his receivers. And Michael Wilson could very well just benefit from playing at the Senior Bowl against better competition and lining up against wide receivers that were perceived to be better than him, and he goes out and beats them. He's going to rise, in this draft.
A guy that I've heard a lot about is I'm going to say this name right, but I think it's Puka Nacua, wide receiver out of BYU. He played for 2 years at Washington before going and playing 2 years at BYU, 6'2", 205, and has shown really well. A lot of very precise routes, large route tree, not a guy that's limited to just a few routes as far as what he does well. Very complete route tree for a guy his size. And I've heard nothing but good things about all the stuff he's been doing there the first 2 days of practice.
Cool. Puka Nacua.
Nacua, Nacua.
That's a first name and last name. That's crazy. I've not even heard of him. Bad on me. But so how about tight ends? So I guess again, pointing to Daniel Jeremiah, who I've been following, and as well as watching a little bit of the Senior Bowl practice today, they're giving rave reviews to tight end Luke Musgrave from Oregon State. He's
Oh
got the
God,
size, the speed, the
he's looking
catch
like a first
radius.
round. Yeah,
He's
he's
making
looking like a
everybody
first
look
round pick.
small. Jeremiah said that he is literally the best player on the field at the Senior Bowl.
Okay, that's yeah, that's big praise coming from him. And this is a guy that really knows what he's looking at. Honestly, I have nothing bad to say about Musgrave.
He
He's
only played in a couple games
6'5".
this year
Yeah,
because of injury.
but it's because of injury. But he's a guy that he's 6'5", 255 pounds, runs like 4.48. Some people are saying like
4.48, right?
yeah, at 255. Some people are saying like 4.45, but what I'm reading is like, no, it's more like, it's a little higher than that, but it's gonna be under 4.5. And
Yeah,
just a
anytime you
guy,
get a 265-pound guy that's 6'5" running in the 4.4s,
yeah,
dude, that guy's gonna be a mismatch nightmare in the NFL.
yeah. This is a guy who, as an athlete, is absolutely special. And people are going to be like, I don't know, because he only played 2 games this last year. But athletically, he's special. And he is a guy that could go round 1.
You
At
might
tight end.
recognize the name out there. His uncle was Bill Musgrave, quarterback coach and offensive coordinator in the NFL for a while, and his dad, I can't remember his first name off the top of my head, was a quarterback for Oregon State as well back in the day in the late 80s. That's about it for the tight end group. I mean, there's Payne Durham from Purdue, I guess is supposed to be kind of a sleeper here. Played in a smaller conference, but had 56 catches, 560 yards, and 8 touchdowns. So, he was a producer, but we'll see what happens when he gets here with better talent that he's facing on the defensive side. How about on the offensive line, Keith? It's a pretty extensive list of players.
Yeah.
But really kind of, as far as Seahawks fans are concerned, who are you looking at as far as making a good impression here?
Oh man. It's hard to look at this list and not just be like, all right, I'm ready to go. Like there's some players out on the offensive line. A guy like DeJuan Jones, who's the offensive tackle at Ohio State. This guy's massive. 6'8", 360 pounds, but doesn't move like a guy who's 360 pounds. He looks like
he can weigh in at 375 at the Senior Bowl.
Oh, wow. So I didn't realize he weighed in that much. I'm just reading like this is what he was listed at for his team. But he's a guy that moves like he's 315 and he's 6'8", 375.
Dude, I watched him. I watched him in practice and he was a mountain of a man. A. B. He moved not like a mountain of a man. He moved with fleet feet and strong hands. He beat everyone that came up against him on the defense. And I'm talking anyone from Keanu Benton to Keon White, the real ultra fast defensive end edge player out of Georgia Tech, etc. He just basically beat everybody. He made the kid from Army, I can't remember his name, the defensive edge guy, just look awful. And then put him on the ground after he made him look awful, just to add insult to injury. So he was fantastic to look at and watch as a prospect. And he's going to be rising as an offensive tackle.
Another guy that has been on my radar and I've been watching, and unfortunately for the Seahawks is doing so well this week that I'm thinking that he may play his way out of the range where Seattle is looking to draft a center, and that's John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota, a guy that if he was the second of Seattle's second round picks, that would be a fantastic pickup because he looks like that. But people are talking about him in round 1 after these first couple of days of practice because centers tend to be smaller guys. They get dominated more against defensive tackles and one-on-one drills. And that just isn't happening. He's just out there holding his own, looking good, doing it. He's known for being a really smart player at center and doing all the little things right. And then now he gets out there and is out muscling some of the defensive tackles, and you're like, all right, that's a starting NFL center if you can do both.
The
And
interesting
he's a guy that's
thing,
going to rise.
the interesting thing about John Michael Schmitz is that he weighed 320 pounds while he was at Minnesota this season. That's what he was listed at. He came in weighing at the Senior Bowl at 305. So he dropped 15 pounds for this gig. And that made him a viable candidate, I think, for Seattle at center because of the way that they want their centers to be a little bit more athletic, be able to move to the second level in a spread zone scheme situation. He would be an ideal fit for me now at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Before I was like, yeah, he's kind of out of the scheme a little bit based on his size and so forth, and the reputation as a mauler. And now he comes in a little bit more fleet-footed, light on his feet, still strong, and he's looking good. Reports are out that he's definitely a riser. He was already in the second round as far as mid second round. Now you're looking at the top of this, second round, fringe first round. But that could definitely be in play for Seattle. Maybe the first, second round pick on a position of need for Seattle is definitely a guy I'm watching at the Senior Bowl.
Position of need.
A couple of guards looked really good too, Keith. Stephen Avea out of TCU looks really good. Nick Boker out of Mississippi is a guy that I think Seattle would be interested in the middle rounds.
Another name is Emil Ekiyor from out of Alabama. He played guard and has settled in as their right guard for the last couple of years and looked great doing it. But Saban actually called Bill Nagy and was like, "Hey, get this guy some reps at center during this week." And let him show that, because he played center in high school and he started his career as a center at Alabama, but he was good enough that he could play guard and dominate there. And now he's moving back over to center just to show that he has that ability to do that. And if he can do what he did at guard at Alabama and be a center, like that's a guy that could be special. And so I'm like watching what's going on with him, because apparently, he's looked good, and he claimed he was rusty the first, few snaps, and it took him a while to readjust to center. But that was the quotes from him. The quotes from the scouts are not saying the same thing. They're just saying that he looked good from snap one. So I find that to be interesting.
Couple other players to watch at center and then at guard. Jarrett Patterson out of Notre Dame looks good. He's kind of an undersized guy at 305, 301, something like that, 6'2", 6'3", named to watch there in the third, fourth round.
I'm surprised he's not a guy that's getting more, like there's a lot of guard talk about him. And he's a guy that to me he just says center. Like his athletic profile, everything just says center. And so I'm kind of wondering like when people are going to start noticing that.
And shorter arms. He got like 32 and a half or 33 arms. He's not extremely long, and he doesn't look long when you look at him. Another guy that there's two guys I think that would be on Seattle's radar. Small school guys. The kid from North Dakota State, Cody Mauch, Mauch. Played tackle for them, moving into guard at the Senior Bowl, which is the proper place for him because he's got 33-inch arms. He's like 325, 35 pounds, 6'3", 6'4". And he's also taking some reps at center. And then Nick Salvadervi from Old Dominion is another guy that's just extremely strong, kind of a blocking. It favors a run blocking type of a guard that Seattle might have on their radar in the later rounds, like 5th, 6th round.
Yeah. Those are a couple of good names.
This is a great group. So the running backs, the wide receivers, and the offensive line at the Senior Bowl are solid. And when you go into the draft, those are all three of those groups are also deep in the draft as well. So it should, and those are areas of need, I think, for Seattle. Second running back, obviously center, interior guard positions on the offensive line, and then wide receiver. It'd be nice to solidify that third spot for sure.
Yeah. And yeah, like I said, you're right. These are positions where Seattle's needs match what we're seeing at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
In interior offensive line, um, wide receiver, and day 2 running backs. And they don't need a top end wide receiver. Well, that's good because there's not a lot here.
The
Right?
other
They
go
don't need
ahead.
a top. They don't need a top running back. Well, that's good because what we're seeing here are guys that are going to be, third rounders, but are really good players there, and you know, interior offensive linemen. I mean, it is a good match of Seattle's offensive needs versus the talent here. So
Yeah.
they're getting a lot out of these practices as far as their ability to build their draft board in the positions where they need.
And we already
Right.
know that they like the Senior Bowl players a lot, and Jim Nagy, they
Mhm.
value his opinion, all that kind of stuff. You go on the other side of the ball, Keith, on the defensive side, it also helps Seattle. There's a tremendous amount of defensive line help in this Senior Bowl when it comes to edge defenders, when it comes to defensive tackles, and then later on when we move towards safeties, linebackers, corners. It's deep throughout, and I think
Mhm.
Seattle is really going to improve their roster this year. So
Yeah, I mean, Seattle better improve their roster with the draft capital that they'd have. The only way that they wouldn't is if they just completely, mail in the scouting process, which they won't do.
yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, and I think I mentioned him earlier. Keanu Benton out of Wisconsin has got a really nice body at 315 pounds, 6'4", long, stout, able to play both the edge and a little bit of the interior at defensive tackle. The sleeper, though, that I think everybody is interested in, that people are starting to talk about a lot now, is Keon White, Keith, from Georgia Tech. At 6'4", 286 pounds. This guy
mhm.
moves like he's moves like lightning. Like you go watch him, and he's just got a tremendous motor. He's got a really nice uppercut move and edge to get around. He's big enough to bull rush you as well. He's definitely on the rise. Daniel Jeremiah in his big board put him at prospect number 8 overall in this draft.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's way higher than I've seen him on anyone
way
else. And
higher.
again, Daniel Jeremiah knows his stuff, so
Yes, he does.
I'm not doubting that at all. He's a guy that I have kind of looked at and was like, you know, Georgia Tech. No one's looking at Georgia Tech. No one's going to talk about this guy.
Right.
He's going to be there in round 2, and whoever's going to get him is going to get a special player that late. Well, not if Daniel Jeremiah has him
Right.
at 8. He's going
Right.
first round now.
Exactly. Right. So, this happens every year where there's a player that just kind of is sitting out in the shadows. Nobody's really watched tape on, of course, Georgia Tech. And all of a sudden, boom, there they are. They fit all the profiles, everything you've been looking for. You thought you were getting a later round steal in the 3rd or 4th round with a guy like this. All of a sudden, he's swooping up, probably exactly right where he should have been the entire time,
Yeah.
and displacing some of the other prospects at the top of the draft that maybe were there because of reputation. But really, when you take a look at what they did on the field, it doesn't match that reputation, and they fall a little bit. Guys like this should have been there the whole time.
Part of it is that, I mean, obviously the stuff that we see when we say, oh, they're looking at like a 3rd round, whatever. It's because most people haven't seen him. Like there's so many players in college football that um, we haven't watched everybody, and it's going to be a long time down the stretch before we
Mm-hmm.
get to Georgia Tech of the places to go and scout.
Yeah.
As far as like, let's face it, we're actually part of the media now, and we're gonna get our clicks and listens if we talk about Alabama and Washington and Oregon and Stanford and Auburn, right? So you're talking about Georgia Tech, no one's gonna care, and so that's why nobody watches them, nobody really talks about them. They sit there in the 3rd round, but then you get to this time of year and everyone starts dialing in, trying to get as much information as possible. and a guy like White shows up at the Senior Bowl, and everyone goes, "Wait, who is this guy who looks amazing?" And they finally go and watch his tape, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this guy's special." And
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
is
no,
why.
he's got explosiveness and power and
Oh man,
lateral agility, and
yep.
then he also defends the run really well. He's one of the best
Mhm.
run defenders at this position in the entire draft. You go look at him, he's got 14 tackles for loss, not just this season, but the season before last. So he's very consistent. He's got the power, translates power to speed, speed to power, whatever way you want to say it, and gets to the quarterback, affects the pass rush. He'd be an excellent pick for Seattle. When you watch him a little closer, if he's available there at 20, I think Seattle, it would
Oh
be in play,
god,
especially if they pick
at
him.
20, that would be amazing.
Yeah, especially if they go quarterback early for whatever reason, or maybe even if they double up and they go defensive line, their top 2 picks in the first round. I'm not a hater on that idea either.
No, if you go Carter at 5, Jalen Carter, and then you come out
Yeah,
and get a guy like White at 20.
it
I mean,
changes your entire defense if you do that.
oh god, that's 2 incredibly special players in the same draft. I mean, that's like what happened to Seattle's offensive line last year when they drafted both their starting tackles, right? You're making that big of a change in one draft if you can get those 2 guys.
Yeah,
I don't think they'll get both those 2 guys just because I don't think Jalen Carter drops to 5. And I kind of don't think White's going to drop to 20.
yeah.
I think you got to move up to 15 somewhere in there to land him.
I just read from a credible source today as well that Chicago is going to stay with their quarterback, Justin Fields, and they're not going to be in the market in the draft for a quarterback, and they're looking to trade out of the number 1 pick overall.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Someone's going to, I mean, a lot of teams with the first overall pick want to trade out of it. Very few ever do because that's you have to give up. The price is really steep.
If, if you were, for example, Seattle at 5 and you needed to move up to number 1 to get your quarterback of the decade, and you would try to do that, it would cost you that 5th pick. It would cost you the 20th pick. It would probably cost you the first pick in 2024.
Yeah, the pick at 34, it would cost you that as well.
So that's steep. That's what we're talking about as far as being steep is concerned. Okay. Other edge defender guys, Isaiah Foskey out of Notre Dame is a big name that's out there. He's projected to go end of first round, top 45 picks overall, getting into the second round. He's actually a player that would fit into Seattle's scheme in the mold of, I guess, probably Taylor. He can drop back into coverage. He's a bigger body though.
You've got Boye Mafe in that same spot with Taylor. I mean, that's a crowded position to spend a early pick there. Would he fit in Seattle's scheme? Absolutely.
The reason that I think that he might be on the radar is we know that Taylor struggles to defend the run, and Foskey does not. This guy is definitely a run defender, an edge defender kind of guy. Set the edge. Boye Mafe is good at that as well. We know the struggles that Seattle had defending the run this last year. So adding another prospect like that, moving away from Taylor, making Taylor just a pass rush specialist, might be something that they would do.
Yeah.
Do you want to run through the list of defenders and defensive tackles that you're kind of looking at?
Oh, so there's a lot of, the defensive line, the interior, the non-edge guys, it's not a long list. But there are some really interesting names on it. People are going to go like, oh, Byron Young, Alabama, of course. Jalen Redmond, Oklahoma. That, makes sense. But I'm interested in Gerard Clark out of Coastal Carolina, which I know is weird. Like, who? What school? But the guy's just got the measurables of an NFL player, even though he's at Coastal Carolina. And he's a guy that honestly I don't know much about, but he's got the measurables of an NFL player. So I want to see what he does this week. Like that, these are the ones that are really interesting to me.
Yeah.
I haven't seen much of Tyler Lacey at Oklahoma State this year, or Carl Brooks from Bowling Green. I mean, there's some good talent here, and I just want to get a chance to actually evaluate him.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Jared Clark's definitely worth a look. Although I thought he was a little plodding when I watched him in 1-on-ones against the tackles and guards in this in practice today. But he's got the size that I think Seattle might be looking for as far as an interior run defender at nose tackle. 6'3.5", 343 pounds, 34-inch arms. Again, he is a little slow. But that wouldn't be what he would be asked to do. He's asked to two gap, take double teams, etc. The other guy I'd be looking at in that similar role would be Sakai Ika out of Baylor, projected to go in the early second round. He's a guy that's a little bit more athletic than Jared Clark, a little bit heavier, and just is a bowling ball kind of a player. Byron Young out of Alabama is a player I think Seattle would have on their radar.
Oh, absolutely.
6'3.5", 297 pounds, 34-inch arms, 81 5/8-inch wingspan. The guy moves great.
He looks like a guy that's going to be your pass rushing specialist at 3K.
Yeah. And so and that would allow us potentially to move on from a player like Shelby Harris, for example, at $11 million cap hit. That'd be in that same sort of mold. And then, other players out there, I mentioned Keon White. I really like him. He's just so long. He's 6'4.5", 280 pounds, 33 5/8-inch arms with an 81-inch wingspan. KJ Henry's out there. If you're looking for a traditional edge rusher guy at an outside linebacker / edge guy at 247 pounds, 6'4", 33-inch arms. Andre Carter, same sort of thing in that bent. Carl Brooks is another guy that's going to be in the Shelby Harris mode in this Senior Bowl at 6'3", 303 pounds with a little bit shorter arms. The other guy that everyone's talking about is Will McDonald, the fourth. That's 6'3.5", 241 pounds, 35-inch arms.
But he's not an interior. He's an edge player. He's not an interior lineman. And it's very similar to Zach Harrison out of Ohio State, guy with athleticism for days, but he's going to be an outside linebacker in this system. And so therefore not a guy that I'm paying a lot of attention to, simply because as needs go, that's low on the list in my world.
That's true. Especially we've got Alton Robinson sitting there too. That was on injured reserve most of the year. Yeah. How about linebacker, traditional linebacker, like middle linebacker? I know that DeMarvin Overshone is sitting there, but he's undersized at 6'2", 220. He weighed in at 220 at the Senior Bowl here, and he was expected to come in at 235 and did not. So that's really light for that position. So I'm not sure what that does for him as far as dropping him right now. I've seen him available in big boards into the 80 to 100 range, and I think that drops him a little bit.
Yeah, and then Henry 2020 out of Alabama apparently had an injury and pulled out last second, which is too bad because I really wanted to get a chance to see more of him and really scout him, because that defense is one that has so much talent everywhere that it's hard to pick on one player and really focus in.
Yeah.
But there's some other guys. Aubrey Miller Jr. out of Jackson State, right? This is a guy that you think of Jackson State, that's not a huge school, but that's where Dion was. And he was able to recruit guys that wouldn't normally go to the school like that. And this is one of them. And I think that he's a guy who's, middle linebacker at 240. So he's got the size and runs really well. I think this type of player that Seattle's going to have on their roster or on their radar.
How about cornerback and safety? Let's wrap this conversation up with the back end of the defense. I think that Tariq Stevenson is probably one of the premier guys here at the Senior Bowl. Super
Out of
impressive
Miami.
with long arms, agility, fluid technique. He was really matching up well against receivers for the most part. Julius Brents again is 6'3", 202 with 83-inch wingspan. This is a guy that's going to be on everyone's radar, I think, if you're looking for a long corner. He's hit and miss on tape, but he's got athletic attributes for days.
He needs coaching.
Yeah. A lot of these guys do. Yeah.
Javon Witherspoon out of Illinois is a guy that people are going to look at and have.
Yes.
It's going to be watched. Anthony Johnson.
I like him. He's a physical corner. Like Devin Witherspoon on the Seahawks would be my dream to go along with Tariq Woolen.
I mean, Devin Witherspoon is Trey Brown in a bigger body.
Yeah.
Just a very physical guy, but actually has more length. And that is not a complaint. That is not a downside, slide or anything. I think he'd be a great fit in Seattle. Safety is a little harder for me in that it's harder to scout safeties from where we do it because we don't get all 22 tape a lot, which means they're not on camera a lot. And so it's really hard. Safety is one of those positions I'm just not good at. I look down this list and I see Christopher Smith at Georgia and I'm like, yep, that's probably a guy that everyone should be looking at. Right. Because it's Georgia and you know how good they've been recently. But then I'm like, okay, Jordan Battle. That's a guy who has been on my radar as a potential, the second round pick for Seattle, and getting a chance to see him this week has been nice. I haven't had any complaints as far as what's going on there. Bigger guy, physical, but very smooth in coverage. So I think he's definitely looked good in this. Is there anyone I'm missing? Because, like I said, this isn't a position group I'm good at.
You did a mock draft a couple months ago, and in your mock draft, I think in the 5th or 6th round, you chose Jamie Robinson out of Florida State as your safety. And I just hesitate on him only because he's a free safety, but he's got shorter arms, and I'm not sure he's going to test well on agility and speed. And so I'm a little wary there. The guy I'm really looking for,
athletic,
the guy I'm looking for here is more of a strong safety guy, but can play in a hybrid role. He can drop back into coverage because he's got great coverage skills and he's so long. Is J.L. Skinner out of Boise State. He's just a physical beast, and he's 6'4", 211 pounds, 33.5-inch arms. He probably had the best 2 days worth of practices at the safety position, according to those that were there and watched all the practice. Scheme versatility though is his jam. He can cover the back end for you, and he can come up and knock somebody with his physical attributes. And so that's a guy I would think would be on Seattle's radar, especially if we do move on from our current strong safety, who's been on injured reserve forever.
Yep.
And, we've got some decisions to make this year, I think.
Have you seen much from Kayvon Merriweather out of Iowa?
No, I didn't notice him in reps today.
See, that right there is interesting because he's a guy that he is here at the Senior Bowl with an opportunity to either explode and become a third round player, or he could sink and be a 7th round guy. And if he's not making plays and you don't notice him when you're watching stuff, that makes me think he's sinking. And that's too bad. I look at him and I see some of his stuff, and I haven't had a chance to scout him. And even when I do, like I said, because I'm doing this via tape and he's rarely on screen, but from what I've, the little bit I've seen and some of the highlights, I'm like, this looks like a guy that can run. And just,
I'll be honest, I was looking for guys that I was already somewhat familiar with today, and I took notes on most of those type of players. There wasn't too many people that just really popped out to me other than really what I was looking for, other than maybe DeHalen Henley out of Washington State, a little undersized, but definitely productive. I just don't know exactly where he fits in the NFL. Yeah, interesting. And the other guy I wanted to talk about that isn't participating but is at the Senior Bowl at least for interview process is Hendon Hooker, the 6'3 and a half, 208-pound quarterback from Tennessee. Looked great before he was injured.
He was a Heisman, like it was obvious, like just point. That's the guy who's going to win it. And then he gets hurt or blows out a knee. And so then, everyone kind of forgot about him. But man, he looked fantastic at Tennessee.
Yeah. And if he drops into the third or fourth round and he's sitting there, Seattle would be, I think, a great destination for him.
He's not going to drop that far.
He's not going to be able to, he's not going to be ready. He's not going to be ready for week one in the NFL, and he's an older prospect. And so you've got to weigh those things out. And those two hits alone, I think, drop him.
Yeah. He's not going to be a guy that you got to take with a 5th overall pick or anything stupid like that.
He has early 2nd round talent, if not higher, if he didn't get hurt.
I think he's got 1st round talent, but the age / he's not going to be ready to participate in this offseason program year one, which means you really look at you're drafting a guy for year 2 and beyond.
And he's 25 years old.
And that's what I meant. And he's an older
not 25 now, but he'll be 25 by the time that happens. And so it's really tough. And so, yeah, you might throw something at the wall with the guy, but you're not going to waste a high draft pick.
No, 2 teams that have talked to him extensively have been Tennessee was one of them, and Indianapolis was the other. Those are 2 teams that have not just they brought him in for interviews, and one of them, I don't remember which one I read, but it was like a half-hour interview on a single player, which is crazy. And so these are teams that are clearly interested, and it might be one of those things where if they miss out on who they're looking at in round 1, well then, especially if you're Tennessee, you go, we'll just run back the Tannehill trend for another year, draft this guy, and then a year from now we've got our guy. I could definitely see them doing that as well.
Interesting. Yeah. There's 2 players I would love to have out of this group. John Michael Schmitz at center. And I want that running back. There's something about Rashawn Johnson from Texas that I just really like. You go watch him play. It's his attitude, the way that he runs. He likes to punish. He doesn't avoid contact. He's a run after contact guy and run after, makes people miss on tackles. As far as percentage wise, was one of the highest percentage of missed tackle guys in college football, even though he didn't have a lot of touches, which is actually not a bad thing if you're going into the NFL, because a guy like that's a punisher, and he doesn't have a lot of wear on the tires right now. And he could be one of the most underrated players in the draft, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think especially because he wasn't the starter. He wasn't the star. So people aren't thinking of him as, he's the guy that you're going to bring in and base your offense around, because he couldn't even, crack the starting lineup in college. But he doesn't have the wear and tear.
Yeah. He did break a bone in his hand, though, but he finished the day practicing after he broke his hand.
Yeah.
Which is a great testament to him, but he's not going to be out there anymore. He's not going to play. So missed opportunity, but maybe that hides him, shields him a little bit more.
Yeah, if it hides him, lets him drop a little bit, and then he ends up in Seattle, where he doesn't have to be the guy, because they've already got the guy on the roster, and they may even have a guy they're very comfortable with as a backup on the roster. And so he comes in as a third guy who's going to push guy number 2. And that's where you want a guy. Why
do I feel like we're going to end up with Rashawn Johnson or Chase Brown or Kenny McIntosh or Evan Hall out of this draft? I just feel like Seattle's going to draft a running back. As much as I think you look at John Robinson, Keith, and he just has this skill set and style and elusiveness and catching out of the backfield and punishing. He's just one of the best prospects I've ever seen. But I couldn't imagine Seattle picking him at 5 or dropping back and picking him at 10 or using the 20th pick to pick him.
Wasting would be the appropriate adjective.
But Chris Rodriguez or Kenny McIntosh, Chase Brown, one of those guys, Rashawn Johnson in the 3rd round, I would just be giddy if Seattle did that, because that would solidify that position.
So the best running back name in this draft, not talent, but name, Tank Bigsby.
Yeah.
I mean, tell you, that is a guy that you hand the ball off to and he run him up the middle. I don't know anything about his skill set. I do actually, but it doesn't matter his skill set. Those are the words I should be using.
That's funny.
You hand it off to Tank Bigsby and you let him run up the middle.
Is he from? He's from Auburn, right?
He's from Auburn. Yeah.
Yeah. He's not at the Senior Bowl, but
no, it's one of those things. I do this every year. There are guys whose names just jump out at me as like, now that's
Storm Duck was last year's version.
Or Sky Moore at wide receiver, which is playing in the Super Bowl with the Chiefs. There are certain players that their name just like jumps out and like, yep, that's the right thing. And Seattle, for the longest time, like for me, like, and this is a name that's gonna throw back for some of you. Max Strong was Seattle's fullback for at least a decade. And that's the perfect name for a fullback. You'll never find a better name for a fullback than Max Strong. And honestly,
he was Sean Alexander's fullback.
Yeah. Tank Bigsby has that same name quality. That's
funny.
That doesn't say anything about his talent, but there are names that just belong at certain positions. And that's one of them.
That's funny. Okay, so this was the Senior Bowl preview, but really it's just reviewing practice and talking about prospects and players, because I don't imagine there's a lot of people that take the time to watch the Senior Bowl, but if you do, it's on this Saturday. Go watch it. You'll learn a bit about players that are probably on Seattle's radar. A lot of the players that we talked about specifically, we wouldn't be talking about them if they didn't fit kind of what Seattle was really all about, and that's where we're coming from. And so if you picked up a little things
really hard, you can go look at the Seattle's drafts from the last 5 years and compare that to Senior Bowl rosters. They draft a lot of Senior Bowl players.
Yeah, Derek Young was a player last year that was on their radar from this, and there's been a few. Quinn Miners made a name for himself last year, coming up from a small school and just belly out and being dominant on the offensive line last year. Ended up going to Denver.
Perrion Winfrey
was a riser big time.
Yeah, he was a defensive tackle that you and I both liked because of his ability to get pressure from the interior.
Yes,
and he rose from complete obscurity up until round 3 at the Senior Bowl. So, guy that we both really liked.
All right. I think what we'll do next week is we'll come back and we'll talk about what we saw at the Senior Bowl, the actual game, and we'll see where these prospects that we just talked about actually, and how they did, how they performed, where they might expect to go in the draft. We'll also come back next week and we're going to talk about roster building as far as the way we see Seattle building this roster from free agency and also in the draft, and find out how we do, because it's definitely a puzzle this year. I've tried to solve it many, many times in my own mind and on this show, talking about it on how we're going to put it all together. And I still haven't figured it out, because the big, huge piece is the quarterback spot.
Yeah.
And until we know that out, it's hard to really go any further, but we're going to give it a shot.
Yep.
All right, let's get out of here. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NWC Hawk. You know where the show's at. And when you find it, hit the subscribe button, both in your podcast platforms and on YouTube. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go on.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWC Hawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.